Did you miss me? I'm late. I know. There was so much going on. But it was good. There was good stuff going on. It's very good stuff going on. But today has been an extremely busy day. And what is it with you doing this thing about not catching? I am blurry again. I don't know why I'm blurry. I'm going to fix this. See, I have to do this. Anyway, hi everyone. Hello. Welcome to our Friday live commentary. Oh, good. Thank you, Michelle, for telling me that it's clear on your end. All right, so today I actually started to, every month or so, I reorganized all the papers because where in the past, there was, all right, I'm going to give you a pencil. Maybe you can focus on that. Can you focus on the pencil? No, anyway. On my end, it's blurry. Who knows what the heck is going on? Anyway, basically take my entire list of papers is in two places. I have one that's like a list of the ones that I've been capturing because as I go around, as a matter of fact, right now there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 open tabs on my browser with what seems to be, let's see if it's a lighting thing. I don't think so. Anyway, I just have to kind of ignore the fact that it's blurry because it's annoying me. See there, it has my hand that's super crystal clear, and then it's still clear, and then it's still clear. And then for me here, it gets blurry again. And I think it's a lighting thing. All right, so hold on, because it's going to drive me insane. Let's see if that works. This is the reason why I need to always wear pants when I do this stuff. You know how there's some people that can do like Zoom meetings and stuff like that without pants? I can't do that because I would get up to do something like what I just did right now without any pants, and I would forget totally. Anyway, what I was saying was that every about month or so, I go through all my papers because I keep my running list of papers in two different places. One, because it's kind of categorized that way and it's easier, and then the other one, the ones I go capturing. So I try to merge these two lists together every month. The thing is that the amount of super interesting papers that are coming out on a regular basis right now is like, whoa. At least for me, it's very much whoa. It's intimidating. Like I said, I have 10 open tabs of things I need to evaluate on my browser alone. And that's not normally one of the places I keep things. So also because I want to keep it like interesting and I want to make it so that there's like sciencey stuff as well as commentary pieces and essays. And at the same time, I don't want to make it too, it's not an easy process choosing what to do. There's just a lot of threads that are really, really interesting. And today I heard about one that I haven't even looked at yet. So anyway, we're not going to go there. All right. So today I wanted to continue on. Next in my list, well, really, I had to skip one, but I skipped it because I realized it was really, really biologically technical. And so I'm like, okay, I have to reevaluate whether or not this makes sense to do this particular one or to do something else. So I'm jumping around to a set of papers. Basically, I have two things queued up because one seems kind of short, but every time I say it's kind of short, it turns out to be super long because I talk too much. So we shall see what happens. But I wanted to continue the thread on education. If you remember the last paper in particular, we talked about Ecozoic education. So how do we really look at our textbooks and revamp textbooks, in particular in higher education that are still focused on the old paradigm, and how could we move them into an Ecozoic paradigm? So, which I thought was really, really cool. This paper in particular that I have queued up is all about overcoming plant blindness. So also very similar, but it approaches it just approaches it a different way. I haven't read, obviously, because I never read the whole thing as we go. I never read the whole thing beforehand. I like to read it as we go, but I've read the title and I've read a few pieces of it because I always have to check whether or not it's appropriate in the sense of, is it going to be something that's going to stimulate us? It's going to be interesting and such. So I'm going to get into it because we have honestly, lots of stuff going on in a really good way. I mean, I Am Plant is around the corner. So if you haven't registered, now's your time. So I Am Plant is going to be awesome. Next week, you may have noticed, and I highly encourage you to go look in the events of NCC. I am going to be doing a live commentary during the week. A seminar just recently got announced about plant blindness and such. And so I spoke to it's kind of a plant sensing one, and plant sentience, that's the word I'm looking for, plant sentience. And I spoke to the organization that is putting together, and I asked if it would be okay for me to stream it live inside of NCC and to comment as we go. So it's going to be a total experiment. I have never done this before. I actually don't even know how this platform, for example, does with that kind of stuff. So it might not even work, but it might work great. If it doesn't work, I'm going to switch over to YouTube because I do have the ability to do this via YouTube. So if it works, great, we're going to do it in NCC. If it doesn't work, I'm going to go do it directly in YouTube, and we're going to test that out there. So aren't we finished? Wait a minute. No, we finished the paper last week. There was a comment, and I'm like, wait, we finished our paper last week, didn't we? Didn't we? Now you have me doubting. I struggle. You might be right. I was traveling, so hold on. Let's see. You're right. It should have been done in 2 pieces. Did I screw up? I might have screwed up. Hey, folks, I screwed up. Hold on. Let me look. No, we finished. Oh, no, wait. Oh, we have to do part 2. You are absolutely correct. How did I miss that? How did I miss that? How did I miss that? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. See, that tells you how, like, I wondered why I had left this in the to-do section. And I was like, why did I do that? And now I have to find the paper because, oh, how did I miss that? Now I have to remember even where we were. Okay. Thank you. See, we are absolutely professionals here. I remember that we were in page 7. I remember this now, right after the list of the textbooks. Where did it say? Yeah, we were right into, oh my goodness, how did I completely forget that we had not complete? I was traveling. All right, we are in the results section, exactly. Now, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh yeah, we didn't do that part. Okay, so I'm opening it. Okay. So I have to change my title, which I can't do. I'm not going to jump the stream, and I'm not going to, whatever, it doesn't matter. We'll fix it all afterwards. We'll fix it in post-production. Okay, last week, erase everything I had just said. Last week, we were talking about Anthropocene to Mutual Thriving, an agenda for higher education in the Ecozoic time. So this was a paper that we had gone through, which was all around the fact that higher education, as I had said earlier, really focuses textbooks on old models. And we know this all the time, but the more that we keep perpetuating that old model, the worse it's going to get. So what they did was analyze this set of textbooks. So this was their paper, was to analyze this set of textbooks in major areas: economics, law and government, applied natural sciences, and these are the names of all of these textbooks. And what they wanted to do was understand, looking at these textbooks, what is the ontology, the epistemology of the way that the textbooks present everything, and should they make modifications to it? So here are the results. Let's get reading and let's get into this because I screwed up before and I talked for a long time for nothing. This is fun. Okay, it's all going to be good. It's all going to be good. Results. Despite the broad disciplinary variety in our textbook sample, we found consistent propagation of an ontology of separation, an epistemology of domination, and an axiology of development. How could I forget this? This is the one where Richard was like, they just use too big of words, which is true, actually. It's very true. Little, if any, space within the textbooks was provided for the critical review of these base assumptions upon which policy recommendations and theoretical models stand. and for the ideology with other underpins them. We discuss these findings in the following section. I have to say, as many of you know, I studied music engineering and electrical engineering. And music engineering in particular part was a very fast developing discipline in that period of time. In that period of time, we had digital signal processing that was really moving. We had internet on the web, which had not really, internet on the web, that wasn't what I wanted to say. Audio and video on the web, which really hadn't made it into the mainstream, because when I graduated, that was one of the first areas that I went to go work on. We had a whole series of forensics pieces that were coming into play as more and more people, we had the beginning of phones, which was audio perspectives, but it wasn't, so we had, recordings that were coming in. There was just a lot of stuff that was happening. And where now things are moving fast, back then it was just moving from completely unknown to something, and it would just appear. And even just in that framework, the amount that our books had to be revised in order to be able to keep up, because textbooks tend to be written in a very, what's the word I'm looking for, definitive way. Because in a textbook, since you're in a university setting, and unfortunately, in particular in the United States, is not about teaching you critical thinking in most of those classes. It's about trying to teach you what they think are facts. And so therefore, they're written in a way where they do not encourage discussion. It was quite interesting even for myself when I did my master's. My master's is in vegetal future, so plants, social innovation, and design. And I found that certain disciplines that should have been more open to, we're presenting the latest we have right now based on the way we're interpreting data, but there are multiple interpretations that are possible. And so we're going to teach you this, but we can also discuss that, especially because I had a lot of sociology as part of the built environment, and how do plants come into the concept of a sociological framework. It was a fascinating program in that perspective, but I found it to be too many definites for an area that really kind of can't have that many definites. So I can understand why when they would look at these textbooks, they're going to come up with a very kind of narrow window of opportunity for some of these concepts, most of them coming from a concept of a paradigm of separation. And now that, they're not going to find a lot of space for that, for being able to look at that and say, is this still accurate? And it's really interesting to me now that I live in Europe for so many years. I've been in Europe, not the same amount of time I was in the US, but it's actually not that far. And the point being is that it's very interesting of like history being taught completely separate from a European perspective, and looking at how many things we get taught as this is how it is. And then another school of thought is teaching it as this is what it is, instead of both of them teaching this is our interpretation or this is our understanding and all these types of pieces. So I'm going to be really curious, a little bit less on what they found, although we're going to have some fun with it and just trying to understand it. But I will be very interested in what they do, what they suggest is the way out of it. Like, what do they want to change? So let's go into the findings. Ontology of separation, right? The examined textbooks revealed an ontology of separation between humans and nature, with the promotion of human exception. I'm going to stop right now. I'm so curious still if I have a thing going on in my own experience right now between nature with a capital N and nature with a lowercase n. I am not saying I have by any means an actual answer that I could argue with somebody, but there's this feeling growing up about like nature with a capital N that is kind of the difference between earth as in soil and earth as in planet, where I feel like N, it's like L, life. I'm going the same thing through nature, the word nature, and the word, actually I'm seeing it in lots of different things for me. I'm seeing it between humans, even plants. Like there's a difference to me between humans with a capital M that is meant to say like humanity versus human with a lowercase m, H, which is meant to be humans as in like, I am a human being, not the concept of humanity, but more of the physicality of being human. and nature with a capital N versus lowercase n. Like I'm going through a lot of these I'm going through a lot of these different kind of thought processes right now, and I'm really curious. I'll probably do a post at some point as to see what other people think. But there's certain words like life, nature, humans, plants, probably much more than I think of if I start going down this path. So I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. Sorry, I'm going to read. With the promotion of human exceptionalism and human beingness over non-human, the law and governance textbooks demonstrated the separation and the conceptualization of the environment as a separate entity to the social institution of law. That's curious. That's an interesting way of putting it. Legal rights and responsibilities were thus afforded to humans only. Exactly. Environmental governance assumes nature as other and seeks generally to either preserve or conserve the environment principally for the benefit of humans, or take a command and control approach to pollution control, again, for anthropocentric reasons. Everything is anthropocentric reasons. It really does. Oh, I have something on my finger. It actually drives me insane because almost everything you see is not like all these beautiful policies of rights of nature and all kinds of things. The way it gets described, and it's what I struggle with so much, is that it gets described from the perspective of, well, to not pollute a river or for us not to mine whatever. It doesn't feel like it's like, what's the right thing for that river? But it's more of what is the thing that humans really need the river for. But that's just my frustration. And, you know, I get frustrated easily on these things. Okay, sorry. Where am I? Okay, there we go. Non-humans are confined to the realm of objects that can be appropriated and or protected by the law, as the traditions of common law and civil law rest on the assumptions that the real is divided into 1, objects of rights such as land, forest, and minerals, and 2, natural and juridical persons such as humans, civil organizations, and corporations exerting rights over the former. It is extremely frustrating, the idea that corporations can be considered persons and not beings in nature. It really is frustrating. Discussions of emerging ecosystem governance concepts in Rule L did not acknowledge the embeddedness of human systems, such as law, within Earth's ecological systems. Economics textbooks revealed similar conceptions of separation between the human and nature. Being, or the subject of an exchange, was conceptualized by the majority of economics textbooks to be limited to either that of a consumer or person, a person being a category that includes human beings and their created corporations. I need to breathe whenever I read things like that. No value, I'm going to say that again. No value was afforded to other animals, because other animals from human animals, or nature. See, nature there is the wrong word. Other animals or other beings that make up as a whole nature. I know I'm being like, but come on, this is supposed to be paradigm shifting. We're supposed to change the ontology, except for in relation to their monetary values to humans. Symptomatic of a human nature dualism, Parkin, in his textbook on microeconomics, situated the sphere of the human economy outside that of human processes, with no explicit connection between economics and the cycles and thresholds of the natural world, because that makes perfect sense. Natural resources were defined as gifts of nature that we use to produce goods and services, because they give freely for us, and were further separated into categories of to be used repeatedly or exhaustible. I know that if I was a river, I would be exhausted from the way people kind of take from me. Just say. This ontology of separation continued into the environmental sciences and animal husbandry textbooks. The textbook examining animal husbandry was concerned only with animals as a form of wealth creation, i.e., livestock, reducing their existence to units of exchange. I should have known that this part I probably blocked the fact that I had to finish this, because I knew that it would be like the uncomfortableness all around my body. Little regard was placed upon engagement between and amongst the more than human and human world, or even animal welfare. You'd think in at least 2024 that animal welfare would be a part of it, even if it's only animal welfare for the benefit of humans, but at least in that perspective. Encouragingly, biological and environmental science textbooks were less ontologically wedded to human nature dualism, but still value ecosystems predominantly for their utility to humans. That's the problem with ecosystem services as a word. Holding fast to attempts to convert biodiversity's value into monetary terms, e.g. payment for services, rather than overtly recognizing the incommensurability of wilderness, nature, ecosystems, biodiversity, etc. See, like, is the nature in this sentence the same as the nature above? I'm telling you, I still think one should be with a capital N and one with a lowercase n. Such a narrow view results in an ongoing positivistic enframement of the environment where the lives of both human and other kin are limited to biophysicality and economic value. Yes. Epistemology of domination. Oh, this is going to be painful. Okay, I'm preparing. I'm getting my Zen on. I am connecting to spider plants. Jasen has already given up. All right. All four textbooks reviewed within or related to the field of economics reinforce an epistemology of domination by making implicit claims that highly abstracted models are objective and universal. Agreed, Michelle, agreed. You got to know the problem in order to fix it. That's why I'm reading this, and that's why I think it's important for us to keep reading this, okay? In the microeconomics text, economics was represented as a science, okay, implying that every economy proceeds strictly in line with a series of interrelated mathematical equations. Yeah, that's the reason why our economic systems, they don't fluctuate at all. Which requires that all human action be either abstracted out or reduced to that of a rational consumer. This reminds me of the discussion we were having of in our last writing time in the writing and creativity group, where we were where one of the words that we were looking at was I think it was spirit, and we were trying to look at the fact that there was a whole kind of description about the fact that we as humans have reduced ourselves down to critical thinking skills and like logical conclusion skills, and we have forgotten the heart concept. Yeah. This is an example of that. Similarly, the text in international economics treated supply, demand, and trade as expressions of natural laws, with mathematical functions and identities fulfilling a position of Platonic ideals. I don't know. I have a feeling that, Anyway, I was going to make a sacred geometry joke, but I'm not. I'm going to hold it back. None of the texts acknowledged other economic schools of thought, and all made claims to the universal application of their discipline. Such exclusion, in effect, not only provides a limited understanding of today's economic and political context, but also reinforces a classroom uncritical of the modern economic complex, strengthening its domination over other conceptions of economics. That's self-explanatory. The text in the field of law furthered the epistemology of domination through parallel and overlapping pathways. Both texts subscribe to private property and economic rationalism as pre-analytic assumptions. Glendon's text in comparative law, which provided an overview of the history, theories, and methods of civil and common law, recognized only legal traditions with roots in the Roman Empire. Didn't we also have this conversation that it's like, it's all the Romans, man. Blame the fucking Romans. Rendering invisible place-based legal stories and beliefs. Such omission undermines the role that Eastern law and culture have played in the creation of Western legal canon. The state was considered the main law-producing unit, while collective subjects such as indigenous communities were presented only capable of producing local customs. Similar to the way in which the textbooks in economics failed to recognize methodologies outside of neoclassic economics, the invisibility of different legal traditions, such as Celtic legal traditions, where, there was like the cow was one of the most important things. And not only that, actually, in Hebrew, the letters of the alphabet also have a kind of esoteric meaning, as well as a number and all kinds of other things. Aleph, which is the first letter of the alphabet, is also ox. Why? Because in that society, the main sort of, I want to say, measure of success was your ox. And so therefore, kind of like in Celtic culture, there was a lot around the cow and how many cows you had and what relationship you had with the cows and how the cows were treated. There is a lot of culture that had completely different models from some of the monetary systems that we had, that incorporated nature by seeing the value of nature for humans, but with humans as well. So it was like their legal structures and their economic structures fell in line with the interrelatedness with the natural world. All of these currently ignored in the systems that we have. Let's see, where are we? Similar to the way in which textbooks in economics fail to recognize methodologies outside of neoclassical economics, the invisibility of different legal traditions and their contributions in law textbooks fortified an epistemology of domination through the self-given right to assimilate knowledge without recognition and or failing to acknowledge anything outside of the claimed universal. The three textbooks which fell under the umbrella of natural science supported an epistemology of domination and reinforced claims to universality. Within the conservative biology texts, all humans were understood to be and accepted as being destructive creatures with dominion over land, failing to recognize ways in which humans have acted in mutual benefit with non-humans. The environmental science texts reduced all life to mere biophysicality, disallowing the possibility of exploring anything further than the mere economics of existence. The thing is, with all of this, is that this is higher education, right? So these are the people that are going to be, that study these and then go into prominent positions of power. And this is what they bring with them, right? And this is why the educational system has to be overhauled so radically right now to allow a whole series of multiple intelligences, but also multiple beingness. Such positions, the animal science texts explicitly position nature as an entity to be exploited for humans' benefit. Such positions are evident in and reinforce the ontology of separation as discussed above. Let's get into the axiology of development and progress. The examined textbooks also revealed an axiology of development and progress, a siren song of unceasing wealth and wealth accumulation. Progress was defined as economic growth and continues to be among the most naturalized concepts in the social and policy domains. And I've thought about this a lot. I've thought about this in the context of, I remember old discussions with one of my brothers where, it was all about investing, or as I was driving through Miami when I was just there, I was looking at the houses and I was thinking, oh, how cool it would have been if I would have bought a house way back when. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, then buying that house for what? In order to sell it now at such a high value? Or is it just because, and I was thinking about all this and it's like, things as basic as, where I live shouldn't be, well, I thought this for a long time, shouldn't be a commodity that we use for just growth, like economic growth. And then therefore spaces that I use, land that I use, and land that is one thing, and land instead, or relationship. Man, this all gets really complicated. I'm going to keep going because I want to know where they go with this, because I could just, you got to know the problem to fix it. I'm just going to keep saying that to myself. You got to know the problem. Michelle's mantra for today. Okay. Within the law and governance textbooks, tenets of legal theory and practice ran parallel with the narratives of economic development. Legal systems are characterized by ongoing politics of coloniality. Yeah, that's the word. Reinforcing power asymmetries between nations and social groups and justifying economic exploitation. Analysis of environmental law and policy textbooks identified frequent trade-offs between economic and environmental concerns, while the pursuit of economic growth has been tempered and has continued to be managed by a top-down approach. The growth paradigm was also evident in environmental law, which was largely concerned with the management of pollution and natural resource conservation. Such limited area of focus was indicative of attempts to systematize and control resource extraction, which is tightly coupled with economic growth. The existence of this paradigm was not exempt from the introductory textbooks in animal science, where animals were viewed as a utilitarian means to an end, the end being the anthropocentric end of producing greater economic wealth. You got to know the problem in order to fix it. The exology of development continued in textbooks introducing microeconomics, international economics, and finance. Here, well-being is limited in definition to the purely material, and beneficial was measured predominantly in terms of gross domestic product. These textbooks depicted growth not only as good, but moral. This is an important one. I hadn't thought about that, but moral and as the key to resolving problems for both humans and the environment. The finance textbook geared students toward becoming the rational, self-interested economic man. Hold on, I got to write this one down. Homo economicus. I've heard Homo divinus. I've heard Homo evolutus or something like that. Like I've heard a few, but Homo economicus, that is required in neoclassic economic theory. Students are taught the knowledge and skills required to manage a firm's potential for value creation, regardless of ethical considerations for current and future generations of life's commonwealth. In this way, the firm corporation becomes a means to an end, and a person means to an end. Like it's a being. We recognize the corporation as a being instead of a plant. Combined with utilitarianism, these texts facilitated economic man's goal to maximize wealth in the short term and achieve a materialistic gain that she chooses to pursue. All right, let's get into this discussion because I'm looking for some stuff that takes me into the future because we're going to need it. Because if not, homonivus, right? Homo everything. That's pretty much the way that it's thought. Discussion. Ecozoic pedagogy. How should learning take place in the Ecozoic? If you have ideas, I want to hear them. Put them in the chat because I'm curious. Having critiqued the pre-analytic assumptions at the basis of education in the Anthropocene, we now provide alternative philosophical grounds for building the pedagogy of the Ecozoic. I'm excited. We insist that the ontology of separation, the epistemology of dominion, and the exology of development and progress be abandoned. In their place, our system of education must teach students to understand and experience our interconnection and interdependence with all of Earth's ecosystems and beings. See again, capital B, lower b. By broadening our notions of value beyond mere utility to humanity, we will prepare students to confront the efficient plunder. Hey, we have Homo sapien, like Homo... No, forget it. What I was about to say was going to be dumb. I'm not going to say it. We will prepare students to confront the efficient plunder paradigm of the current educational and civilization ethos, and we will re-embed human societies within the natural world. So 5.1, an embedded mode of being. The education process we advance is, in essence, what might amount to becoming ecozoic. Students and teachers are part of this process, beginning with higher education and scaling out to all of our institutions. We must focus our pedagogy on the attunement of the human being in respect to the myriad facets, minds, bodies, senses, emotions, and spirit, to the comings and goings of what Tim Ingold has called the meshwork. This re-education of attention to the deeply interlaced threads of the comings and goings of all beings that make up nature and culture is truly what it means to think ecologically. All of us at all levels and species are indelibly intertwined. This is not a matter of mechanism or materialism, but of relation, a result of life being the origin of telos, where mattering begins to matter. All beings interact as subject, from the level of individuals all the way up to watersheds and communities, to polities and the planet. This stance implies an emphasis on multiple generative ways and means of knowing beyond mere rationalism, and the education and culture it is based upon and reinforces. The legitimacy of forms and means of knowledge that have fallen outside this modernist and colonialist logic has been winnowed out by the philosophical filters. In the quest by mainstream Western society for domination and ontological hegemony, we have created the Anthropocene and dismissed our own knowledge and wisdom. The necessary epistemological shift will allow a more complete understanding of the world's complexity, drawing in what is now unfortunately cast, though encouragingly less and less so, as informal sources such as traditional ecological knowledge. Okay, so bringing in some tech. Ooh. Sorry, there's a chat discussion going on. That's kind of funny. Yes, Michelle is feisty and she has every right to be. And Laura, you'll catch up to it, because seriously, I mean, we're in the good part now, because now we're in the solutions part. We had to identify the problem space. And as Michelle keeps reminding me, you got to know what the problem is to fix it. So I just kept saying that to myself, washing it over me as a mantra. But now we're in the part where I agree, teaching kindness and emotional intelligence is super important. Emotional intelligence is getting a lot of visibility now. In Damanhur, we actually have a kindness ritual. It's like an oath you can take if you want to be kind. It has a whole series of pieces from a ritual perspective. It's really quite beautiful. And I think it's, at first you kind of say, well, why do I need to do this? Then you think about it for a minute. You're like, oh yeah, I do need to do this. I am taking this oath, the oath of kindness and gentility. Expanding our epistemological boundaries to include relational, embodied, and embedded epistemologies will only enrich our educational world. This is not a call for an ontological relativism, for we are mindful of the cautionary note of the Zapatistas that there are words and worlds that are lies and injustices. It is in this context and from this place that we will unlearn our Anthropocene ways and become re-enchanted with the natural world. The task ahead, as Paulo Freire insists, is that of reinventing the human. And we imagine this re-embedding as a connecting of our social and normative systems within the broader community of life. Freire argues that education can and should be a mutually constructive process in which humans and subjects transform both each other as well as reality itself. This process must be carried out in the context of a relationship between students, teachers, and Earth. Give me a second. Mutually constructive process in which humans as subjects transform both each other as well as reality itself. Okay. These very relations are in themselves a form of pedagogy. Okay. I like the idea of going to school and not really knowing how to be human, like not humaning well. And so the idea that it's okay for us to walk into class kind of not knowing. I always find it amazing. I actually had a bit of a complex about this for a long while. It wasn't until I got to Damanhur, one of the first parts of my Teknakale process. Now in Damanhur, we have 4 bodies of government. We have the spiritual method action initiatic school, which was kind of the foundation upon which everything was born. Then the social side, which came very, very quickly. Then the game of life, which is change and the movement part. The idea that it's very easy for us to get caught up in habits and to sort of rest on our laurels. And then there's the technacale, which is that then we have to take everything and look inside and see what is it about ourselves. I would say that it should be the emotional intelligence piece of the whole part of this. And one of the first things you do when you enter into that body is create your first law. And then you start to identify some of the things you wanted to work on. And this thing, which came really from my educational system and the way that I was raised, was really interesting. I have older siblings, and therefore I used to love to take their textbooks. So I tended to walk into classrooms knowing the material that we were going to study, because they were much older than I was, and I had been studying their materials. So I just got used to being somebody who knew. And so when I would walk into conditions that you should be able to not know, like certain classrooms, I felt inadequate. I felt like embarrassed. And especially if I couldn't get it. Like I remember the first college class that no matter how hard I tried, it was relating to music theory. Actually, it's not trained. It was ear training. And I tried so hard. I studied, I practiced, I did everything. I could not get it. And the teacher was so not compassionate. I had one teacher that was very compassionate, but I had one teacher that was not. And it was more like as if it was my fault. Like, you're not doing it. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm spending hours. Or my nephew, I think, took the same math class like 5 times when he was in community college, because he just couldn't get the math. And he took it like 5 times. And I was so proud of him for continuing to take it, because I thought it was awesome that he was not allowing some other structure to just tell him, you're dumb or whatever. And he just kept taking it until he eventually, he got it to a certain point, then eventually quit that program and went into another direction altogether. But I think it's important for us to have also I don't know if this would be an ontology or an epistemology, but of being able to make mistakes, of being able to show that you don't know, but rather than being arrogant and trying to guess. It's kind of like the SAT scores that, penalize you when you completely don't know something or when you get something wrong. And so I feel like we shouldn't be penalized for the things we don't know. We should be encouraged to figure it out. I don't know how, it's one of those things. I feel like that's some of the biggest pieces, because then people walk into situations thinking they're supposed to know things. Okay, I'm not going to go off on that rant. I was going to go off on another side tangent. You know how I can get. This shift in pedagogical orientation can reemphasize the relationship between teacher and student and frame learning as a construction of meaning. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. Instead of a transmission of knowledge, a construction of meaning. That's really beautiful. Learning is increasingly understood as a social process mediated by cultural context. Hey, in NCC, we totally know it is a social process. Totally. For example, Grunwald extends critical pedagogy to encompass the elements of place, creating a link between the classroom and the real world outside, encouraging students and teachers to go beyond classroom simulations to include local, social, and ecological context, as well as cultural politics. Similarly, Pradano's pedagogy of degrowth calls for a classroom that trains students to question the social desirability and ecological sustainability of the growth-driven system and to envision alternatives. In this sense, the entirety of this project must be conscious of the facts that it operates in the complex web of oscillating and cyclical histories of oppression, power asymmetries, and colonialist dynamics. For us to engage in a process of ecozoic co-liberation, we must, as individuals and communities, be cognizant of our positionality, privilege, and marginalization within this ongoing history, and display a willingness to change and adapt on a personal as well as societal level. This process engenders a commitment to supporting the self-actualization of all community members and must be, I wonder if in this all community members, are we talking about community members as in human speaking community members? How do we bring the non-human, how do we bring other kin into the conversation more directly? And must be supported and encouraged by an ecozoic education. All right, education becoming ecozoic. By indoctrinating students with the destructive ideologies detailed in the preceding sections, the conventional education system is complicit in the domination and plunder of nature. Ecocide and the concurrent drastic diminishment of alternative ways of human living on Earth, ethnocide. This system facilitates the concept of Gestalt and framing mentioned above that cast all forms of nature as available and destined for human consumption. We got to know the problem to fix it. In essence, constituting a standing reserve available for plunder. To transition into the Ecozoic, the sciences and humanities and everything else, it's not like it's just the sciences and humanities, everything, must transcend this frame and build in an integrative manner in its stead, a manner of shared thriving. This shift would have profound effects throughout every traditional discipline of the academy. Considering the following examples of finance, trade, law, and public policy. Let's get into it. Let's get into finance. This one's going to be a little tricky, Okay. An ecozoic system of finance would be based on a value system which reverses the undersupply of public goods and advances ecological goods. I hope they define what they mean by ecological goods. That nurture both societal and ecological systems, thus broadening the concept of public goods in the process. Finance for the Ecozoic would incorporate the notions of sustainable scale, just distribution, and efficient allocation when it engages in value creation. Students should be taught to recognize the socially created and embedded nature of money and its attendant social and biophysical power relations, rather than treat it only as an independent, neutral tool for facilitating barter. Thus, finance education in the Ecozoic would feature, I don't know why that word is hard right now, feature cradle-to-grave effects of wealth creation and conceptualize what it means to create non-monetary value, how to fund the creation of that value, and how to incentivize that process. Cradle to, should it be cradle to grave or should it be cradle to cradle effects? I need to think about that. I mean, I think one of the big difficulties in the financial world is that as we move to cradle, kind of the concept that everything has a cycle, and then that cycle when that cycle is complete, it moves into a different cycle that takes what one cycle considers to be discarded and creates a nourishment from that perspective. In other words, using Michelle's language, less crap, because crap is constantly being nourished, recycled through the system, or it's either being reused or it's being turned into something different, or it's going to fuel something. Like, it's always still in there. It's kind of like matter, right? You can't really destroy it. All you can do is, transform it. And so this perspective of how do you put a value to that when the thing that I create today, we think about whatever I get to create. So this pencil, for example, will get consumed because I'm going to sharpen it all the way to the end. And then this end has seeds in it. It has sage seeds. And so I will plant this. And so the whole pencil will be consumed and I will have to go out and buy a pencil. But it's in its consumption, the pieces that I go when I sharpen it, right? All of that goes into other perspectives. It goes into my compost. It gets used in other ways. And again, this little part becomes the seeds that then nourishes the next plant. So I'm just going to put this into the earth. So this is something where, from a natural perspective, makes sense that I have to go out and buy another one. But so many of these other things that I have around me can be replaced. Can be fixed, can be used in a different way, or they end up moving into a different life cycle. How do we value that when today the value for a company is the fact that you have to buy another one? Big questions. Big questions for a Friday afternoon. Okay. A broader understanding of why and for whom and what values should be created must be adopted at every level of finance education. For example, funding rewilding has shared benefits for our socio-ecological system. No longer is it appropriate to ask solely, did I or my firm attain a satisfactory return on investment? Rather, we must teach our students to ask whether their investment created a beneficial advancement for our parties impacted. And again, it should be called out here that all parties is other kin. I feel like they're so in it that they don't realize that who's reading it needs to be bombarded with certain terms over and over again. All parties should include other kin for the sake of other kin's life. Not, is that tree growing healthy so that I can eventually cut that tree down for a nice big profit, but more of, is that tree growing healthy because the tree deserves to be healthy and have a healthy environment. Economic trade. While the national level is a convenient way of measuring trade, it is too simplistic and reductive for the planet in peril. Trade must be viewed through a lens of interconnectivity, with the intertwined material and social aspects of trade embedded in socio-ecological systems that span multiple ecosystems. Students of international commerce would be taught to think in much greater depth about the geopolitical and community level context and scales of trade, as well as the interplay among them, and learn to make decisions on the basis of ensuring the mutual thriving of ecosystems near and far, on which we and other beings depend. Our shared ecosystems often span national boundaries. The nation-state model is consequently too individualistic and unrealistic for understanding the full effects of the trade. A few years back, I went to what's called the Biennale di Architettura. It's the architectural event that happens every, I don't remember how many, the Biennale happens, I think, every 2 years in Venice. And one of the pavilions had an amazingly poignant exhibit around the wall, the famous wall. For the people in the United States, you've probably heard speak of the wall, probably even in other countries, excuse me. The wall is the famous like border wall that defines that they're looking to create or have been building to separate out, the United States from Mexico. Only that this might be fantastic for humans, but ecologically speaking, it's not like nature thinks, oh, this is the United States, I'm going to have one climate, and this is Mexico, I'm going to have something different. And so who's really getting screwed beyond migration issues in this wall is all the beings of nature that move through this territory. Like, it was such a poignant exhibit. It was so beautiful because it was showing both on maps as well as through art and in many different contexts, biological context, and how all the different species that are being affected by this human decision to put up a wall that is ripping and destroying that is leaving an ecological footprint way greater than the political footprint that it's touching. It was intense. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody really talk about it. And it's something that so needs to be talked about, because this is what we do with our artificial boundaries, right? We don't build our boundaries based on what is happening at the ecological level. We build them based on these political perspectives that oftentimes tear apart families, just not only human families, like other kin get torn apart as well. You got to know the problem to fix it. For example, students should be taught that approaches about such as, wait, hold on. Oh yeah. Excuse me. For example, students should be taught about approaches such as green supply chain management, which does incorporate environmental considerations. However, they must be challenged to think beyond the greening of the firm's direct consumption and production, the cradle to grave approach, and evaluate impacts through the more interconnected bioregional and socio-ecological lenses. Let's get into the law part. Understanding who and what has value will also need to be addressed within the legal field. We're getting closer though, Veronica. Just keep thinking like Michelle, right? You need to understand the problem to fix it. So yes, they exist. We know that these exist, but we're pointing them out. We're giving some solution-y type things, and we're going to keep evolving that. So this is positive, the fact that this exists. While environmental law currently takes the human as its subject and nature as its object, the emerging field of ecological law involves broader frameworks such as multi-criteria evaluation and decision-making that incorporates complex and incommensurable values, including the value systems in relation to the environment. These are not constrained to economic value and anthropocentric concerns, as is the current practice. Students of law in the Ecozoic would be taught an ecological law emphasizing a politics of care which seeks to promote harmony between human groups and life's commonwealth. The ontology of interconnectedness demands a move of crucial importance, namely to expand the law beyond the normative, the human, and the state. This theoretical and practical approach ought to problematize notions of representation, agency, standing, rights, and even justice to include sentient and semiotic beings such as forests, animals, and plants. A legal ontology for the Ecozoic then should not only consider the prescriptive attributes of the law as a system of norms, but also its world-making capacities as a system of socio-ecological relations. I often wonder if I wonder weird things all the time. I often wonder if in our human definitions of things, we actually had a more, what's the word I'm looking for, pronounced value of friendship circles and family circles as entities that were recognized in whatever capacity they are. If it would be easier for us to conceptualize the idea of forests. I mean, I know it's much more than that, but like, certain kind of environmental ecosystems, I often wonder if we had more human definitions to describe the interconnectedness of us, not just corporations, although that is one entity, but I wish if we were to maybe recognize a lot more the plurality of all of these sort of entities and interlocking that then ends up with the human being, our interrelatedness, it might be easier for us to think about the natural world in that way. I know we should just think about the natural way, the world in that way, but us, we as humans sometimes need to see something that feels familiar. A legal ontology for the Ecozoic should not only consider the prescriptive attributes of the law as a system of norms, but also its world-making capacities as a system of socio-ecological relations. Have a great lesson. Governance and public policy, the fundamental concern of Ecozoic era education and governance, is to teach students to design and implement policies that pursue the long-term survival of our ecological community and that improve the welfare of all its members. Further, we must review these policies to ensure that our good intentions actually yield desirable outcomes. Public policy students should be taught to reject dominion-driven development schemes in favor of mutually enhancing well-being at all levels of government, which impact our ecological and social systems. Our stakeholders are not only people, but also other than human beings within our socio-ecological communities. The task then is twofold. First is the extension of what we conceive as both the polis and the public. Future students would subsequently learn that justice must be extended procedurally, distributionally, and recognitionally. Is recognitionally really a word? For all members of our ecological community, rather than the self-chosen few. Second is re-embedding. Students must be taught to create and analyze public policy through the lens of complex and interconnected systems. See? This is what I was talking about, the community. So Michelle writes, so we don't have community anymore in the way people worked together to help everyone in that community. If we can teach that, teaching to expand that to everything would be less of a leap. Exactly, Michelle. And this is actually one of the reasons why this is pretty much the reason why the main model that Damen-Her, of all the things that Damen-Her teaches, if we could just teach the model of community, how different would the world be? Like if we could, that's why we want to bring the model of community, which doesn't necessarily mean living together, but it means that community aspect of doing things in community, of being in community at multiple different levels would be very different, would be very different. Yeah. One potential framework for analysis is that of deep sustainability. The actions of government, both direct purchasing and provisioning, and indirect, regulating individuals and industry through taxation and subsidization, can continue to operate at odds with social thresholds and environmental limits. Rather, students must be taught to prioritize environmental and social goals, followed by economic ones. Such reprioritization of goals, paired with less anthropocentric conceptions of stakeholders, is the beginning of the necessary shift at the policymaking level to prevent ecological collapse. 5.3, praxis and future research. If textbooks are to remain relevant within the Ecozoic, they must incorporate embedded, mutually relational values. Cornshaw et al. Further advise that education itself in its entirety must become holistic, transdisciplinary, and cognizant of ecological limits. Aho, I am with you on that. Since socio-ecological systems vary widely across Earth, we eschew the standardization education and its inherent insensitivity to local needs and cultures, and instead, essential components of scientific and particularly ecological literacy will need to be adapted locally with place-based curricula. This approach localizes the fruits of contemporary civilization scientific achievements within the lands from which they came. Consequently, not only the education of, but the fields of inquiry themselves must be integrated in a way that moves beyond transdisciplinarity. Social science will continue to further join ecology and earth system sciences as necessary co-components of research. A focus of future research should be an analysis of how broad social structures contribute to biodiversity loss and how they might contribute to conservation and rejuvenation. The holistic, transdisciplinary, and consilient way of educating drawn from systems theory, ecology, and relational thought will come to replace the reductionistic and individualistic tendencies of current educational practices. It is our hope that this expanded form and content of education can yield introspective, passionate earthlings who are perceptive and capable of practicing multiple ways of being, knowing, and doing. I also think that we need to think about our educational system in terms of other forms. Like there is a lot of bio-inspired innovation, a lot of social innovation that can be learned by observing how other species do education. Beavers have an excellent and really interesting educational system in the sense of the way that they teach the young. It's a 2-year program, if you think about it in like human words, but really still looking at the way beavers do it. Kind of an apprentices program. And I think that there are many other species that teach their young in very unique and expansive ways that if we were to look at, we could revolutionize the way that we think about education and different aptitudes. Because today we pigeonhole most students through models that have one very specific way of being, and that's not good for everybody. There's lots of people that have different intelligences and different ways to really experience life and should be allowed to learn through that approach. So, for the Ecozoic to manifest on the necessary global and geological scale, we need humans who honor not only the individual, but also the community, the ecosystems, and the more than human world. To do so, we will need approaches and textbooks that tell a story aligned with the Ecozoic. There must accurately reflect scientific understandings of interconnectedness and engage with the multiple means and ways of knowing, the differing perspectives and cultures that constitute the entirety of the humanities' responses to the question, what does it mean to be human and alive? All right, our concluding remarks. We're almost at the end. Ecozoic pedagogy is both a practical response to biophysical realities and an ethical response to the dire present. Its process or praxis is of equal importance to its content, and we focus on the mutual transition of both. In this manner, and to reiterate from above, our goals are twofold. 1, to nourish the growth of healthy, joyful, self-determining, self-regulating, moral human beings, embracing in process and outcome. What Albert Schweitzer's poetically called a reverence for life. See, here I would have put it with a capital L. Capital L. Capital L. And two, to inspire a praxis in defense of that life. Tending, see here I would have had lower little L, tending students' capacities to build coalitions of solidarity powerful enough to effectively dismantle systems and structures of domination and oppression, and in their stead to build, maintain, and reproduce equitable systems and thriving multi-species communities. This reorientation of collective social life towards the service of its own maintenance as an ecologically embedded subset of life is fundamentally our goal. With our textbook analysis, we have highlighted the pervasiveness of an ontology of separation, an epistemology of domination, and an exology of development across a wide range of subjects in higher education. We have then explored how reorienting towards an ontology of interconnectedness and an epistemology of egalitarian subject-to-subject relationship, and an exology that includes plural values and world-making practices is fundamental to both context and pedagogical requirements for transforming higher education to become ecozoic and away from the modes of efficient plunder of the Anthropocene. Table 2 summarizes a proposal that the ontology, epistemology, and axology of the Ecozoic form a critical framework for both analysis and world building. Pretty cool. I'll let you look at that yourself when you look at the paper. Any research agenda based on our findings should be situated within the existing struggles attempting to reshape the current structure of academia. Our hope is that our framework can be used to perform a rigorous review of movements and experimental reforms that from both within and outside the walls of academia. Higher education institutions that have attempted alternative models of pedagogy, such as Hampshire College, Evergreen State College, Antioch College, Goddard College, the New School, State University of New York College of Environmental Sciences and Forestry, Earth University in Costa Rica, and Universidad de la Tierra in Oaxaca and Chiapas, Mexico, to name just a few, can be analyzed through the lens of this framework. Likewise, programs around the world which promote mutually enhancing relationships between humans and Earth, but are situated in traditional academic structures, can also be assessed with the framework in order to learn from the specific challenges and transformations that they face or are part of. Following the co-production of learning our approach to pedagogy, we propose that students across diverse disciplines design and run their own peer-to-peer seminars examining how their education can become ecozoic. Our framework can help to reflect on fundamental questions of what are we trying to learn to do in academia? What is our knowledge for? And what world are we creating? University reform then becomes a broad co-created world-making process as a student-led seminars use our framework as a tool, a lens, an organizing concept, a vision, and or a pathway. Importantly, what becomes of this process is undefined as of yet and will look different in different institutions, communities, and countries. As a standard teaching tool within institutions, some alternative textbooks or core texts that have motioned towards an ontological plurality can also be reviewed using the ologies of the Ecozoic. For example, the curriculum open access resources in economics core textbook and accompanying online portal was launched in 2013, and by 2018 had already transformed introductory economics curriculums in more than 100 universities worldwide, due to its innovative, accessible style. Core represents a movement away from the strict delineation of neoclassical economics towards economic pluralism. And while it may not reflect the full framework present in Table 2, the success of this text in transforming curriculum should be examined more closely. The framework could also be used to assess the many pedagogies considered alternative today, from Freire, Guldenwald, and Pradanos, discussed earlier, to the primary school pedagogies such as Waldorf, Ivan Illich's undeschooling and forced schooling. A systematic review of the literature on the practices and impacts of these alternative pedagogies could help elicit lessons from alternative primary schooling around the world, revealing existing barriers to transformation and potential new pathways to investigate. This broad process can be a way to identify places, people, and movements already engaged in this work, and thus the stories of challenges, successes, and novel insight into world building and transforming higher education can contribute to setting a clear research agenda. Ecological economies provides one compelling example of an alternative approach to to economics that has waxed and waned between a radical departure from the mainstream and serving a master discipline. At its inception, clear ontological foundations were purposefully avoided in order to establish a shared conceptual space for people from many fields. Splash and others have called for an ontological foundation to be established with healthy debates over deep and shallow ecological economies. We agree with assertions that the field must be more firmly based on the understandings of the biophysical and social embeddedness of human economic activity. And also just in the idea of like continuously learning. So like, let's simplify it. The idea that, looking back at the ethical and scientific principles on which ecological economies was founded should serve as a starting point to clarify its goals and reinforce and refocus its research agenda for the Ecozoic. Ecological economics uses basic concepts of sustainable scale, just distribution, and efficient allocation of entropic thrift. That is, achieving a satisfactory quality of life with the minimal ecological cost as the means to achieve the stated goals of well-being, justice, and sustainability. However, clarifying the ontological, epistemological, and axiological groundings of these stated goals could potentially enable ecological economies to fulfill its paradigm shift. Through this lens, ecological economics can also clarify the methodological pluralism that serves as the foundation to its epistemologies. This is not to say that methodological pluralism is not a valuable approach, but the vague ideological construction lacks boundaries, resulting in an often superficial transdisciplinary rhetoric. To summarize, we're almost at the end. We're 2 paragraphs and then we're done. We propose using our framework to carry out case studies of alternatives to textbooks and their potential impact on curriculum and program development in higher education. A systematic review of primary school pedagogies and their impact on world-building co-creation of knowledge becoming ecozoic. Case studies of programs that promote mutually enhancing relationships between humans and Earth within traditional academic institutions. Case studies of alternative universities as a systems approach to pedagogy, and student-led seminars across disciplines to explore how we may all participate in the restructuring of education to become ecozoic. In conclusion, through a close examination of a sample of textbooks used for disseminating the foundational knowledge of disciplines, we find that anthropocentric ontology, epistemology, and axiology are upheld and perpetuated in universities in North America and throughout the world. Ecological economics is an example of one attempt to reorient a field around an ecozoic narrative reflecting the biophysical and social embeddedness of the economy. Beyond ecological economics, we further challenge all disciplines and transdisciplines to question their unexamined assumptions using the ologies of the Ecozoic framework offered in this paper, and in doing so, collectively begin to transform higher education and ultimately co-create the Ecozoic era. It's a pretty good ending. Lots to chew on there, huh? Lots to chew on. I mean, I think that I'm glad that we read this, because I think as we, even here inside of NCC, are working on are co-creating our reality as we continue our discussions, I think it's important for also us to recognize within ourselves and to feel empowered to be able to help each other more clearly call out when we're falling into these older paradigms, and where is it that we could be looking at things in a more ecozoic framework. So I'm actually really excited that we did this. And like I already have chosen, going forward, we're going to be talking about how plant blindness fits into the educational and the science. And I think after we do that, it will be very interesting for us to have a discussion about how these 2 pieces sort of merge together. In other words, how is it that this ecozoic outlook that we've now been talking about for the last few weeks, and how these educational models relating to nature blindness, plant blindness, and our colonialism and our kind of consumption focus, and all these different aspects that we've talked about today, what is it that has created for us, and what can we do both collectively within the naturally conscious community, but also individually as we take what we experience inside of NCC out into the greater world? what can we do with it? How can we use it? Where can it be a force, and where can we use the resources at our disposal individually and collectively to make changes and to impact the systems in which we interact on a regular basis. So we have several educators that are in the group. We have people that are working with other kinds of organizations that are obviously touching on many of these topics on a regular basis. And we want the naturally conscious community to be that place where we can not only have these discussions, but experiment with some of them too. I mean, if anybody wants to bring in a different educational model to some of the things that we do, to experiment how we can take, whether it's a class like Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, or whether it's the approach that we have for the book club or for one of our master classes in the different programs that we have, how can we use this more ecozoic approach or ecozoic framework in order to approach the material differently. I am all ears for that. I'm completely open for it. Just don't ask me to teach little kids. I'm not that good at that stuff. Just not that good. All right, that's it for this week. Like I said, please keep an eye out when I publish the calendar on Thursday. On Sunday, you will see that we have another live commentary that this time we're going to test out doing a live commentary on a live stream, something that's actually being a seminar that is being hosted, and we are going to be publishing that. All the information about that is in events for you. You will find the event. It is, I believe, Tuesday. And plus we have other events coming up next week, and in about 2 weeks, a little bit more. Next week is going to be a good week. We start voting for our next book in the Plant Wisdom Book Club as we approach the end of our current book. So we're going to be putting out information about that. We're going to have this new live commentary that we're going to attempt to do on an existing video. And see, it did it again where, hello, focus. All right, it's obviously trying to tell me today that it doesn't need to focus on me. And we're also going, we just have a lot of stuff coming up. We have a lot, and we have I Am Plant coming up at the first week of April. So just go into the Naturally Conscious community and explore, and you'll see lots of different things. So that's it. That's me, Tigria Gardenia. This is it for our Friday live plant consciousness commentary, or in this case, Ecozoic consciousness commentary. And we will see each other again next week. Until then, remember, resist the urge to hold back your evolving green brilliance. That's it. I'm out. Bye.